No, that's
Um,
Cheryl Latham, Cheryl. So I think
oh,
we're
hi,
missing
Cheryl.
one
No,
person.
Cheryl, yeah, well, let's start and we'll continue the list in order do you want an intro or you want me to do it?
Oh, I can go and do intro.
Okay, good.
Hello, everybody, and welcome tonight. This is a open and joint public meeting between the Department of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and the Human Relations Committee. What we're talking tonight is about building the equity plan. So tonight we'll be taking comments from different stakeholders and community members on what it would mean to make St. Louis County a change agent. The change agent has different definitions, and we'll get to that in just a second. But this is an open and public meeting. So Karen, can you start us off with the Pledge of Allegiance?
For those of you who can stand or would prefer, find a flag of your choice, hopefully an American one. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much for that. So everybody may come to this meeting with their own definition of what a change agent is and how that definition could apply to St. Louis County. That is a good thing. But to get us started off, I'm going to read one definition of change agent, and that is that a change agent is a person from inside or outside an organization who helps an organization transform itself by focusing on such matters as organizational effectiveness, improvement, and development. A change agent usually focuses their efforts on the effect of changing technologies, structures, and tasks on interpersonal and group relationships within an organization. The focus is on the people in the organization and their interactions. So kind of using that idea, we were thinking about tonight, what does it mean for a county to be an active change agent? What does it take for a county to look at its systems and say, we can transform this area a little bit better? So with that, we're going to start taking some input. Karen, do you have anything else you want to say before we start taking some? You're muted.
Pauline has just come on. For those of you who have not had a chance to meet me before, my name is Karen Oresti. I'm here in my capacity as chair of the St. Louis County Human Relations Commission, which has been a partner with Mr. Murdoch, who is the acting director of the county's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I am also acting director of the county's Department of Administration. So we started June of last year to begin the community engagement piece that will result in an equity plan. So there's been researching, gathering information, but the most important part has been hearing from different members of the community, and the topics, the areas we've covered go from equity in education, in government generally, in law enforcement, in healthcare, in housing. I know I'm missing a few, but this last session, which is what Kenny has already shared, which is how, in the midst of everything that it is doing, can the county also be a meaningful change agent as well. And so I appreciate y'all taking the time to be with us. So we have also I don't know if there are any other participants, we've been taking video testimony from people as well. People have submitted written things. There have been people who've appeared in person when we haven't been challenged by the virus. The idea is just to gather it all into what hopefully will be a concise and very resourceful, literally resourceful document that can not only create a structure, but then can be flexible and responsive and changeable, depending on what we need the county to do, either the same or frankly differently. So we've been giving everybody 5 minutes fully to discuss, and then we do some question and answer and some conversation, and then we'll hopefully close it out by 8 o'clock.
All right. With that, our first speaker tonight is Colleen Starkloff. Starkloff. Oh, it's very small print. Oh,
Hi, Colleen.
Colleen, are you there?
You're muted. You're muted.
Never works when you're muted. It
Always.
just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for inviting. Sorry, I need to leave my hands off the screen.
Okay.
I really appreciate this. And so we're not talking to an audience, we're just talking to the four of us, is that right? And you're gathering information?
There's just talk to us. There's more than 4 people on this, but we're gathering information on what you think St. Louis can do better to transform this area and be a better service to the citizens.
But this is an official, this is somewhat of an official thing, so we are recording. It is something that if somebody needed to sunshine law it, request it is available. So it is an official county record. So just
Okay.
aware of that.
Great. Let me pull up, I have some notes here. I don't think you'll be able to see them, but doesn't matter. So I guess a couple of things that I wanted to say was that I've been working in the field of disability rights since the early 70s. And one of the things that I find as we've progressed over time is that when companies talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and when they hire diversity managers, they tend to go for race, ethnicity, LGBTQ, gender, and disability seems to remain low man on the totem pole. And I see that in so many companies. And just like you could have a woman of color, for example, who's also identifies as LGBTQ, you can also have that person be somebody with a disability. So I really encourage people when they have conversations about this to think more broadly about how disability is very, very much a part of the disenfranchised groups that we're also recognizing and representing and lifting up as part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that's going on all over the country. But there's a number of things that had to happen before this could happen, and that is the fact that for many people with disabilities, the access to assistive technology is very important. Having anti-discrimination laws that protect us from discrimination. So we have the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which does a lot of those, fields a lot of complaints, and we have the Missouri Commission on Human Rights that fields a lot of complaints, and that's important. But we have made progress in that realm. We've got the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and then when the Rehab Act was updated and Section 503 got some implementation, that became very important. Is the county a 503 contractor?
I don't know for sure.
Especially under, I'm embarrassed to say I'm not sure. I suspect that the answer is yes, because any of the contracts that we have, some of which are supported by federal dollars, federal grants, and that sort of thing, we have to comply, and we do comply.
Right.
And I'm also making an assumption, apologies again, that some of the departments most affected by that would include Parks and Recreation, Transportation, and the Department of Human Services, and the Department of Health. Not uniformly across the board, but an awful lot of folks in the county doing county work. So.
Well, you get CDBG funds, I think.
In some cases,
in
yes.
Office of Community Development, and you have, so I think you are, and where I'm going with that is that we never had any teeth behind Section 503 until 2014, March of 2014, when we were able to implement regulations on that. And that sets the bar at 7% people with disabilities be among your workforce. It also allows for people with disabilities to voluntarily disclose that they have a disability, which you couldn't ask that before. And now on a voluntary basis, you could. So you could, I'll summarize this later, but you could start at 7% as an aspirational goal and try and put out a policy, a request to all employees of the county and just ask, if you haven't already done this, to just ask if they would care to voluntarily disclose whether or not they have any kind of a disability, for a couple of reasons. One is so that you could make sure they're properly accommodated, and also that you could, if there's any changes that need to be made in your, your buildings, your policies, whatever, and accommodations, you could offer those. But you also, I think, want to let people know that the county wants to be truly a DEI entity, and also put out statements about what diversity, equity, and inclusion means, and not just talk about people of color or people of different other, marginalized reasons, but also mention the word people with disabilities. So, for example, I would think that County Executive Page could deliver a public address announcing that the county feels very strongly about hiring people with disabilities, encouraging people to apply for jobs within the county, and that would be a way to bring about attention to this issue. I also would encourage the county to have its personnel, particularly your hiring personnel, and those who do accommodations, those who are welcoming to new people in the workforce, to be trained. Now, shameless promotion, we do that. The Starkloff Disability Institute does that. And we have trainers who are themselves disabled. You could also participate in our workforce disability summit in October. You could prepare an initiative for the National Disability Employment Awareness Month in October, and partner with us or other disability groups, and announce your statement and your initiative to increase your disability employment at that time. What else did I say in here? I had a number of things that I wanted to make as suggestions to you. You could become a Dream Big partner. And the reason I think that's important, a Dream Big partner, a corporate partner with the Starkloff Disability Institute, would mean that we would bring the youth that we engage, the youth with disabilities that we engage in the summer, to the county. We'd work with you on structuring a whole morning of activities that introduce the young people, their teens in high school and college, to the various kinds of jobs that people can do in the county. And there's a ton of jobs in the county that you could expose them to. You could have materials that you give to them as a part of this awareness day that we take the students to 5 different places in a week, and they can sign up for as many weeks as they want. We're doing 4 this year, and we're lining up our agenda now. So if you're interested in participating in that, and you wanted to make that something that you announced as part of your initiative, you could do that. But I'd need to put you in touch with my staff right away so you could get on the agenda. But those are good ways to let young people with disabilities who are maybe looking for summer jobs, are looking for internships while they're in college. We have 2 programs. We have Dream Big and Access U. But in the summer, the students in those programs are combined. And we do that because we want the students to know, as they approach college or they're in college, if they haven't fully decided what their chosen career might be, we want entities like the county to say, we'd love it if you'd come work for us. Here are the jobs we have, and here's what you have to do to qualify yourself as being talented, or provide the skills you need in order to be qualified for the jobs that you're looking for. And that way the students can get excited about something you're doing, and they have a goal when they go to college, trade, or tech school. I would put it on your website that you're wanting to increase disability participation in your workforce. And you could also post it on the various nonprofits that post for jobs. We don't necessarily, at Starkloff, we don't necessarily deal with the kind of jobs that your workforce centers do. I think you run a workforce center, don't you? Yes. And so we are focused primarily on folks with disabilities who want to be college, trade, or tech bound, but there's lots of IT jobs. There's lots of trade jobs that the county needs, and there's a lot where you need to have a college degree or some other type of education or preparation for that. So those are kind of my main touch points that I wanted to bring up to you. And I hope I probably went over my 5 minutes, so I'll just be quiet. But
That's okay. We might have some general questions for you. And I would want to start off with one question. You talked about training through your institute. I've never been to that type of training. What does it do? Like, help me understand more about it, because it sounds interesting to me.
well, it depends on which one we do and what your needs are. But when I first started doing these trainings, I put people at small tables and had them practice doing interviews of people with disabilities for jobs. And that's an important exercise to go through, because some people who are hiring managers don't have particularly a comfort level talking to somebody who's deaf or somebody who can't use their hands to type. They don't know how to deal with the disclosure issues. And so being able to practice in a safe environment where we don't make you wrong, but we help you to repeat it and get practice on doing these interviews so you can be comfortable and not see somebody who comes in and who's blind as not being able to handle a computer, but you don't know that because your hiring manager is scared to ask the question. Right. So it's a way to become comfortable. And every time we do it, people always come back to us and say, my gosh, that was not as hard as I thought it was going to be. You know, they make it into a bigger deal because they're afraid they'll say the wrong thing, and their legal department will come after them. But we don't want, you know, if hiring entities feel that way, they're not going to hire anybody with a disability. They'll just say, we had 8 people apply for the job and they were more qualified than you. And that's not what you want if you're sincere about this effort. So Kenneth, that can be done, and people usually enjoy it. We do it over a 3-hour period, and we switch the trainers around so that people have the experience of your faculty or your personnel would have the experience of interviewing people with different kinds of disabilities.
Oh, thank you.
It becomes very impactful for them. They come in scared. They don't look at our trainers. They don't talk to them. And when they leave, they have more questions for them, and because they become comfortable.
Could I ask just a little bit about the 503 language, and Amy, certainly weigh in if you have some thoughts from your end. Why 7%? And what do you think? I mean, you know, I look at our MWBE numbers, you know, which are now at 24, and they're floors, they're not ceilings. They're right. And certainly I think there are some years where this program that we have in MWBE, which is modeled on the federal DBE program, is gonna grow. So 24 and 9 for women, 9.5 for women. Where's the 7% come from?
Well, my feeling about that is that whenever the federal government is going to make you do something, they're going to set the bar low.
Yeah.
You don't have to set 7% as your targeted goal. You can do better than that. It's like the ADA. The ADA is all that you have to do, but it's not all that you can do. You can do more than that. You can make a sincere effort and say, we really want to do better than that. So it also, though, some companies get to 7% fairly quickly just by the voluntary disclosure, but not all. It depends on how huge your personnel list is. I mean, how many people does the county hire? How many employees does the county have?
Right now, well, when I say fully staffed, and I'll take the police department out of it because they operate a bit separately in terms of merit, non-merit folks outside the police department, about 3,000.
How many?
About 3,000, roughly.
Okay. So, you know, 7% isn't that big a number.
No.
There's a company that I represent that knew before they came in to talk to our council that they ought not to even dare set 7% because their whole business model deals with people who have disabilities. So they came in and said, we're going to set it at 10%. And we said,
Right.
great. And just recently, they achieved that 10%. And our council said, good, we are so happy and proud of you. How about 15%? They're like, what? But it's just, if you're sincere about this, pick a goal that you think you can get to, but don't stop there.
Right. Sure.
And what you find happening is that as people become more comfortable, and as you are bringing more coworkers in with disabilities who are sitting alongside somebody who doesn't have a disability, and they go to work together and they socialize together, the idea of people with disabilities in the workforce doesn't become as big a deal as it was thought to be.
Thank you for that. All right, we're gonna have to move on. Do you have another question, Karen? Or you?
No, I'm sorry. Thanks. Go ahead. Oh, Caroline, let me also introduce everybody. Caroline Fan, who's a member of the Human Relations Commission as well. Thanks for being here, Caroline.
Oh, thanks for
Yeah.
being here, Brown.
I've been here for a little bit, but video off. So, have we been discussing like basically disability and how many folks in the county employees are disabled and like how they would disclose that if they wanted to disclose that, or what are we?
Well, we were just talking initially around the Ms. Starkloff had mentioned the Rehabilitation Act, the 503, Section 503, sort of aspirational, at least starting goal, and what that would look like if we did ask for voluntary disclosure from the departments to see what they knew. I don't know that anybody's actually ever done that before, so it would be an interesting step to take.
I guess I think you know, I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of a county employee, and how would that be disclosed? Like, I think that folks might not want to be discriminated against for disclosing. But then, second point is, if we're talking about MBWE, I think that someone had pointed out to me that for the county, that should include veterans and folks with disabilities. And I think there was another group that is included at the federal level that is not.
And it does.
So Caroline, if I could weigh in on this, there are people who are going to be intimidated about their disability just because they are. And this policy doesn't say, you have to tell us if you have a disability. This policy says, we want to make a sincere effort to increase the number of people with disabilities in our workforce. And so we would appreciate it if you would feel comfortable to let us know if you have a disability, and we can begin to see where we are. We'd like to get to 7%, which is the bottom line. And also, but in that statement, you'd also say, and if you need accommodation, please let us know what it is. Some people may not have asked for accommodation because they're afraid that if they disclose. Now, the other thing you can do, and I didn't bring this up, is you can do awareness days. You can do lots of things that bring attention to folks with disabilities and how to be welcoming in the workforce. And there are things you can do that put a positive spin on how much we really are happy to have this individual working there.
Right.
There are people in other marginalized groups who don't necessarily want to disclose their either, and that's their right. But we just feel like, I mean, you know, I have 2 disabilities, and I talk about it because I want people to know that this is not something that I see as a black mark on me. I actually am rather empowered by the fact that I have a disability, but not everybody feels that way. And under this starting policy, it makes it voluntary, but the message should have a lot of support and positivity in the message.
Right.
All right. Thank you for that. And thank you for speaking tonight. We're going to have to go to the next speaker. And the next speaker lined up is Dewitt Campbell. Dewitt, you there?
I am.
DeWitt
Hi,
with the
everybody.
NCCJ. Come on. The
Tell us a little about yourself, DeWitt.
Right, well, thank you all for having me. My name is Dewitt Campbell, and I am the program director at NCCJ St. Louis, which is a local nonprofit that works to deliver diversity, equity, and inclusion training and consultation to nonprofits, government entities, for-profit organizations, healthcare field, et cetera. And that's how I met Karen and Kenny, both through my relationship with NCCJ. I really appreciate the opportunity to think about change agency from the perspective of a government entity, and in particular St. Louis County, which is so close to where I am. But I will say that I don't try to give easy answers. I try to give really hard answers, but they will also secure job placement for a long time if you've got to work on them. So first, I do want to say that the goal of inclusion for all people, which you can find on our website and was part of the request for me to talk about today, is an aspirational goal and a goal that's probably not attainable, in part because there are groups of people that are very specifically seeking to not make an inclusive space for all people. And some of those folks are getting pretty savvy and saying, hey, DeWitt, you say that you are for the inclusion of all people, but you don't want to include my group that is a white nationalist group. And I'm like, you're right. I have been misleading you because I really do not seek the inclusion of folks that are not seeking the inclusion, or at least willing to talk about the inclusion of all folks. And so I think that that's a really important thing, and things cascade from that. If you're really not for the inclusion of folks with disabilities, then you shouldn't be at this table. You shouldn't be in this job. You shouldn't work for an organization that is stating that it is seeking the inclusion of all people, because the goals don't fit together. For St. Louis County, I think one of the really important things is for all aspects of St. Louis County to question everything. Our society was not built for the inclusion of all people. It was built for a very select group of people at a time when all people weren't even necessarily here, and certainly weren't being thought of in the way that they're being thought of now. And so over time, of course, because we've had wonderful people in wonderful positions that have tried to fix some of that, but the tweaking on top of the tweaking on top of the tweaking on top of the tweaking does not make for an inclusive county government for all people. And so everything needs to be questioned. Why do we fine poor people? Why do we make a financial penalty for people that are already at the bottom of the economic ladder, just period? You know, if you get a boot put on your car and it gets put into the system to get towed and then to be put on a St. Louis County impound lot, like there's a reason why the ticket wasn't being paid in the first place. So then all of these other things that follow that really need to be rethought. And that's a really serious example, but why does this particular committee have automatic representation from these 5 places in government? Everything should be questioned. And sometimes you're going to ask the question and say, yeah, we want to keep doing it the way that we are doing it. But in some cases, things need to be done differently. And places like Ford through Ferguson can help with that as it relates to race. And some of those same things that you question related to racial equity can then be applied to other identities. And there are other organizations out there that are specific to different identities that can help you do sort of an audit of your organization on those different levels. The next thing is, if St. Louis County is going to be a change agent, then St. Louis County needs to hold 100% of your staff and 100% of the folks that are paid to provide services to St. Louis County accountable to your goals for inclusion. And we've got to get off the fence with saying, well, that was the way that they were raised, and so we've got to make accommodations for that. Or they haven't had exposure, or allowing people to say that it's about their political affiliation or their religious affiliation, and which all of that is bunk. And we got to stop playing games. If we are for inclusion for all people, then we can't use some of those things to be excuses for not being inclusive of all people. And my agency gets hired quite a bit to try and convince folks to act right, to treat people fairly. And so I imagine that the same thing happens at county government level, that there are folks that really care about these things, and we try and ask folks to act right, to be better. And these need to not be optional things. We need to mandate that folks are going to step up to the plate. And then you do training and things like that in education to help people meet those goals, but we don't ask people to act right. We require folks to meet the standards of their employer, just like there are other standards that we don't even question requiring folks to meet. I think those things can be really important. One piece of that is, and like, it is not a secret within the LGBT community that the youth shelters in St. Louis County, St. Louis City, St. Charles County, etc., don't treat them well. It's not a secret, but they're allowed to not treat them well. And if you look at the policies and procedures of each one of those shelters, the policies and procedures probably look pretty decent, but the day-to-day practice is not that way. And the same goes for every marginalized group in every part of government, that there's some aspect where there are folks that are not being treated well. It's not a secret to those communities. And so it shouldn't be a secret to the rest of us either.
Wow, well, thank you for that. I really like what you said when you were talking about there are entities that don't want inclusion, because that's our modern truth. There are those who hinder, stop, or push the other direction, the very effort that we're trying to create here. But I do have a question for you when you said, when you're talking about, think big and be bold and reanalyze all systems. Is one system of inequity, I'm just throwing out one. Have you heard of the pink tax? And have you heard of that happening in St. Louis County? Administration, all over Missouri actually, administration products are taxed because they're not considered medically necessary, medical devices. So they have to have a sales tax. Is that fair? And have you heard people talk about that?
I'm not well versed on that at all, but if people are having an inequitable experience of the law, of the financial system, then there's something that needs to be fixed.
So your general thesis is look everywhere, reanalyze every system, and find how they're broken in some ways, because the inceptions of many of these systems started off inequitable and were never designed to be completely equitable to people. Is that a good way of?
Yeah. And not all of it was done with malice. For instance, Kenny, if you and I were to build buildings, probably every building in St. Louis would have a hat rack. Because especially in the wintertime, I need a hat.
Yep. And big doorways.
I built the world. I would be building the world for me. And unfortunately, we don't do nearly as good a job as we maybe think we do at building the world for others. So if others aren't at the table, whoever those others are, if they're not at the table when things are being created, when decisions are being made, then even our best efforts fall short. And so we need to have more folks at the table, at every table.
And everybody has bias. So even if you try to create a system, your bias is going to leak into that system. We've seen that with computer programming and modern technology systems that are supposed to be smarter, but they're still biased in those systems also.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even me around my identity. When Ferguson happened, my first thought was, I wish that some of the protesters would calm down. And I saw lots of middle-class leaders, Black leaders in the community, also telling frontline young folks to calm down. And at some point I realized I'm not representing them well. I don't know their day in and day out experience. The Department of Justice report and how it spoke about how folks are being treated, I get a little bit of that, but I can usually get myself talked out of it pretty quickly because I don't have the exact same experience. So I wasn't representing them well when I said calm down. So if I can do it around my own identity, my assumption is that we can all do it around somebody's identity, if not even our own.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I had a similar experience. I have privilege around class, and in Ferguson, I was like, well, why can't they? And then I started thinking, well, maybe they don't have other options.
Right, absolutely.
I apologize, I'm just a little distracted there, but Dewitt, I wanted to follow up and also note what Lynn had put. Well, the two issues about creating a strategy for accountability, I think, is a very specific structured conversation that we can have. But the other one is I do want to understand the youth shelter piece, because I'll be candid, from where I sit, I have not heard that. So I would like to learn a little bit more. Can you point us in the right direction on that? Because frankly, the advocacy side of my brain wants to make a phone call first thing tomorrow morning and say, what the hell? So,
yeah. Well, and first of all, I want to say that if you do make the phone call, you can't just ask the agency execs, do you treat gay kids?
Oh, of course not.
But Karen,
No, that's a good point.
The point is that I have mentioned this to folks, and they have just asked the execs, what's your policy? The policy was stated, and they came back to me and said, oh, there's no problem, because the agency execs say that there's not a problem.
Right.
So go to the kids that are in the system, and go to the kids that refuse to go into the system because they're scared of how they're going to be treated in the system, and ask them. And pretty much any youth LGBT focused organization can give you a lot of help on that.
Not a problem.
Commissioner Fan?
So my friend Claire Burrell has been working on LGBTQ youth within shelters. I think they have a Missouri Foundation for Health grant, so I'm happy to connect you.
It's a good idea.
So to go back to something you brought up previously, I think trainings are one thing, right? I don't think training is everything, and I'm trying to think about staffing, right? Like, how do we get folks internal? You know, I do not work for the county. I'm a commissioner. And I have these discussions and debates all the time about language access, but then also, right, to one of our previous, evening kind of public meetings, there's language access, but then there's also a ton of folks here who are not immigrants, who also speak languages other than English. And I feel like a lot of that is also forgotten, and that there's always a default to migrants or immigrants or New Americans. So I'm trying to think about ways in which St. Louis County is already a change agent. I think the Board of Elections having the software where we can vote from any precinct, and having the GIS mapping is one, but and I'm sorry to say this, I am very hard pressed to think of other instances as a county resident where St. Louis County is a thought leader, right? So, and I think that's due to generations of leadership and staffing or lack thereof. Um, if you had to pick one particular facet, other than the LGBTQ youth in shelters, where would you, I guess, can you name one aspect that you think St. Louis County is a thought leader or is already a change it? And then another aspect where you think St. Louis County is particularly lacking?
I mean, that second list is pretty long, actually, and in part because of the nature of being county government. I don't. This was the first time I was asked to even consider a governmental entity as a change agent, much less a thought leader. So I'm still reeling from being asked to think about being a change agent at any level. So I don't really look to governments to be thought leaders, and in part because of the nature of trying to serve such a diverse community. And leading up to this point, our belief in trying to have be neutral, which I'm not for neutrality anymore, but I think it's easier for me to not be neutral than it is for county government to not be neutral. But on the flip side, I think the criminal justice system needs to, I mean, and not unique, this isn't unique to St. Louis County, but St. Louis County is certainly a participant in not reaching what I think are even its own stated goals. Like, we are not making communities safer because of the way we're policing and the way we're incarcerating and the way we're fining. Like, it's just, it's not happening. And so that needs to be fixed. And there's a disproportionate impact on Black and brown folks in that process. But poor folks in general are not making out very well in that system. But then anywhere, again, where we are finding people, you know, or even deciding that you gotta pay to park here. Paying to park here, if you make $75,000, means a very different thing than if you're making $20,000. And you know, like downtown Clayton, you know, I don't. And what are the reasons for that? Is it because it's a great source of income, or is it a great way of keeping people out? Or is it, can it be both of those things? Which goes back to the question everything. And if you really want to be inclusive, then there are probably a whole lot of things that need to be different.
So,
I have a reaction to that, if I may.
oh, can I go first and then?
Go ahead, Commissioner Vaughn first, and then we'll take a secondary reaction.
So one thing I noticed when we moved here, pretty much almost 8 years ago, is the lack of a social safety net within government, right? So there's no public hospital here. We moved from New York. There's a whole network of public hospitals. And I wonder, right, if by basically subgranting or whatever some of these federal monies to non-for-profits and shifting the burden of services and whatnot to the non-for-profit sector and the corporate sector, if the region has shortchanged itself, because I don't see a lot of these services being provided. And I'll give an example. I last weekend, I got an urgent text from an elder person in the city who had a monolingual, non-English speaking constituent who was going to lose her house at tax auction. And I know nothing about housing and I don't speak that language. But I picked up someone who did speak that language, drove them somewhere to meet an advocate who also it was not their job to do this. They were just a concerned resident neighbor who had seen a particular ethnic name on the short sale list. And because we did that, even though my friend did not have a car, that individual, that elder's name did not appear on the short sale list last Tuesday, right? But I don't know that, no, sorry, let me say this differently. I know that neither I nor my friend are trained social workers. But who is going to go and scour these lists and who is going to go provide these services in other languages into communities who aren't going to look at a postcard in the mail that requires you to enter in a 6-digit code? Like the census tried that. The census got rid of it because it did not work even for people who spoke English and read English. And so I guess I think we also need to rethink everything, but I also think we need to shift more of the social services back, actually, frankly, upon the government. Um, because it's actually in some ways easier, I think, to have that accountability from the government than it is from the nonprofit sector. Just a thought.
Pauline, did you want to say quickly?
Yeah, this is an interesting discussion. I'd like to reflect on the fact that one of the reasons we're having this discussion tonight is because St. Louis County wants to be an agent for change, or a change agent. And I think that's important because if I look back over my years of work in disability rights, had we not held the government accountable to be an agent for change, whatever you call it. I mean, we beat them over the heads in the early days because issues around disability were not well understood by most legislators unless they had a family member who had a disability. And using public policy to change laws like the ADA and all of those things really began to make the government be more sensitized and more accountable by the fact that that laws were passed. But it was a citizen and government collective effort. I mean, the onus was on us back in the 60s and 70s. I'm dating myself, but to really make the point that no longer do we need to continue to treat people with disabilities like we do, that we need to give them Medicaid, but if they get a job, then their Medicaid goes away. I mean, things like that people who don't have the lived experience of disability don't understand. So I think that nonprofits bring something that government can't do, because government can't do it all. But if there's a partnership, and if the messengers from the citizen groups, whether they be nonprofits or a commission like Carolyn's on, whatever, you can affect change, very, very positive change. And if you put it into law, you can hold people accountable. You can hold the government accountable. You can hold the cops accountable, that sort of thing. So I wasn't, I thought it was good that you were saying, how can we be a change agent? And I think you can, because I've seen it happen for a very long time, or we wouldn't be sitting here talking about disabled people working for the county government, because there would be no laws against discrimination. There would be no policies that are required to be inclusive of people with disabilities as part of the DEI discussion.
I like that in this conversation there is hope, and that we all have hope that we can get this accomplished.
Oh, Kenny, you muted yourself.
Oh, I do that sometimes. So I thank you.
I would like to say in our defense, Clayton is the one that set the parking rates. Damn them. And but the Shaw Park I think it's called the Shaw Park Parking Garage, the one by the Clayton Metro, has free parking for people who come in to do county business. And there may be other spots that I'm not familiar with that would do that. And frankly, if people don't know that that's the case, then I think we have to do a better job of educating what we have that is serving the public more effectively and equitably. That's on us. I also, what Lynn is saying, the CARES money, the original CARES money, I may go out on a limb and say something wrong, but I will say the CARES money, I think, is mostly done, being spent. I think the ARPA money, the rescue plan money, is the one that's at issue right now, and that we've been doing these various town halls and surveys to get information on. I can't tell you if those, if things like that, the bus passes and things like that, would qualify under ARPA, because the government has pretty carefully limited what county governments and certain municipalities can do with those ARPA funds.
Yeah, they're tight rules on.
So the rules are pretty, I don't want to say they're really narrow, but they're pretty specific. So I think, although I do think in supporting the disability community and others, that there are issues around economic equity or disparities in the economic impacts of COVID, where we could spend money, ARPA money. And I do think both the county executive and people who have filed comments with the county, there is some agreement there from a public health perspective. So maybe watch that space, because that could be a positive moving conversation. But yeah, so I'll stop there. Go ahead, Ken.
Absolutely, that's a space to watch, because I think that also is. I also believe that's a space for some concrete advancement that we can look at.
Right. Good.
But once again, let me thank you, Dewitt, for sharing tonight. And let's bring a new voice, Cheryl Latham from CASA of St. Louis. Welcome, Cheryl. You there?
I am. Good evening, everyone. I am Cheryl Latham. I'm the Chief Program Officer at CASA of St. Louis. I want to thank you all for inviting me to be a part of this discussion. I actually was thinking, I think I'm in the wrong spot. I think they got the wrong organization. But I would start really by saying, because I have a lot of thoughts coming to mind. Let me just start by quickly talking a little bit about CASA and what we do. CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. We recruit members of our community, everyday St. Louisans, to be a part of a collective response to providing best interest advocacy for children who are in foster care due to abuse and neglect. So if you've seen Dr. Phil, you've seen him spotlight CASA volunteers, but they really are folks who are interested in the well-being of children. Our CASAs serve as the judges or commissioners' eyes and ears. They really help them by gathering information about what life is like for children in foster care, so that when they go before the judge has the most complete picture possible and can make informed decisions about what should happen next. Kids who have CASAs realize some real benefits. They spend less time in care, fewer placement disruptions. Most importantly, they get more of the services that they need, so that while they are in care, it can be foster care time can be healing time, and they have the opportunity to develop the resources and natural supports that help them thrive in and out of foster care. I think if I could just really get to the topic at hand, I think for me, really focusing on the families and the children that we serve. It should be no surprise to you all that and we serve kids in both St. Louis County and St. Louis City's foster care system, but about 80% of the kids in foster care in our community are children of color. And additionally, they are children who come from families who are often single female-headed households. They live at or below the poverty line. They have very limited resources. To focus the conversation on St. Louis County, I am a North County resident, and it should be also no surprise that most of the children that are placed in protective custody in St. Louis County predictably come from a few zip codes, largely in North County, right? And so back in the old days when we were doing court in person, right now we're still very much hybrid. it couldn't be lost on me as a person of color when I go down to the first floor, because our office is located in St. Louis County Courts building, and I see all of these families who look like my own, right? Yet I know that the research says that Black parents, brown parents are no more likely to abuse their children than their white counterparts. So when we think about that from St. Louis County's perspective, for me, I always say to myself, ain't nobody asking about what's going on here, right? Like, I don't think anybody is doing anything with malice, as DeWitt says. And DeWitt, you know, I remember you from the training that we did back in the day. I think that everyone is committed to keeping children safe, but I do think that there is an opportunity for us to make a clearer distinction between what are true safety issues and what is really poverty. Right. And so when I think about how St. Louis County can advance change or be a change agent, I think it really requires, and the work that we do, I think it really requires us to look at some of the systemic issues, right? Some of them are outside of St. Louis County's control, right? We don't do hotlines, they don't do the initial screening. But when they come into the court system, I do know that there are Office of State Court Administrator employees, but the St. Louis County employees who are really the most influential in the team setting and in the dynamic, those are the places where I think we don't have a lot of folks with lived experience. I heard Colleen talk about race not being the prevalent issue or the primary issue or the only issue. That's right, absolutely, right? But to have an understanding of not just race, but what it means to really have to struggle to meet your basic needs. What it, when you think about our families and their access to services, right? If you, I'm gonna be honest in this conversation. My dad had a substance abuse problem. He was addicted to crack in the 1980s. Everybody was, right? But he had a good job. He worked at AT&T. So when he needed to go to treatment, he was in for 30 days. It was lovely. It was plush. It didn't cost anything. He's been sober now for 30, probably 40 years. I can't quite do the math. But for our families, they don't have access to quality treatment. I do think that that's something that St. Louis County can influence. DeWitt, when he talks about placement, safe placements for children who are transgender or gay, oftentimes we see kids enter protective custody. There's not an appropriate placement for them. I think that having good access to quality, accessible mental health treatment, medical care, outside of no shade on the health department. That's not what I mean at all, but they can't support all of the community and the kids in foster care. I also, let me just make sure that I speak to some of the systems where I think St. Louis County can have some influence. Treatment, I talked about accessibility to good quality resources, putting resources in the communities where they are needed. I do understand, again, our office is in parking. One of the perks of my job is that they pay for parking. But if you are barely if you barely have transportation and you have a 9 a.m. docket call and your case does not get called in until 1 o'clock, it's a barrier. Because for most of our parents, if they're not working, they're not getting paid. So it might only be $5 or $10 for us, but that's $5 or $10 that they have to use outside of what they would ordinarily use it for. Parking at the Shaw Park is a ways away. If you got a wag, a baby or two, that's a barrier, right? And so I'm just thinking about some of the things that can sometimes be really low-hanging fruit for St. Louis County. And then also, I would just say that really I've worked in several systems, and so we're not unique in this way. I'm not a St. Louis, I'm not a Missourian. This is a familiar challenge, but if we want to really create change, then sometimes we have to, do better and be better than other people. I would say that the response around foster care, our families, our children are often invisible, since most of them are being removed from North County. One of the perks, I guess, is that North County has the largest number of licensed foster homes, whether they are taking children from the city or children from the county. So that's a resource. But our school systems are often challenged to meet the needs of our kids. That's not what we're talking about today. but oftentimes we see that kids in foster care are more likely to come in contact with the police. They're more likely to receive severe disciplinary consequences, right? So it might not be, they may be receive long-term suspensions. Again, that's not the county. But if a child is expelled, and I'm on a school board, and they are in foster care, and I know St. Louis County has a program that provides academic instruction for kids who've been expelled, but it's far smaller than the need. And so again, thinking about, for me, what I thought about my presence here is that all of these things that you all have talked about heretofore are important. Many of our families have some mental health issues or physical disabilities that they have to navigate. Dewitt has talked about things that are very important. And I would like to add to their choir by saying, because I focus on our program, our mission focuses on kids, being able to allocate resources to them and their families helps us achieve the stronger community that we know we all want and need. And so I'm going to stop here because I know that there might be some questions, but I don't want to oversimplify it. There are many complex reasons why families find themselves involved in the foster care system. We are here because we stand in the gap in a bureaucracy so kids don't get lost. But I've been doing this a long time, and I have come to realize that if we really invested in creating some of the equitable access that we say we talk on for our families, y'all could put us out of business. But until we do right by the least of us, I'm gonna be here every day doing this job, and it'll be somebody behind me when I finally get old enough to retire or I die. And so I'll just stop here.
Could I ask a quick question? What do you see as the impact, positive or negative, of the Children's Trust Fund?
And can everybody not mute that's not speaking, please?
You mean, Karen, you're talking about St. Louis County Children's Services Fund?
Yeah. Sorry, Children's Services Fund. Yeah. Correct.
So CSF, we are an agency that is very fortunate to have been a part of the CSF funding program. I don't have words right now. It's getting late. Yeah. Since its inception.
Dollars, right?
Right. So we've been receiving funding. CSF has been invaluable. I think CSF does great work. They fund great programs that are doing a lot of good work in our community. But if I could be very honest, it's like drinking out of a fire hose, right? These are the communities that have been most greatly impacted by the pandemic. Right. On top of keeping it 100, if we're focused on the need coming from North County, we are largely an African American community, so there has been another layer of stress on the work on the everyday life. Sure. And so I think CSF does what they can do, but I think that they would say that the need outweighs the resource.
Could they be a player on the systems side? I mean, money is a part of what you've talked about, but it's only a part, right? But they have such capacity. Could they also influence systems perhaps more effectively?
I think so. I definitely think so. And I think that for me, Karen, it's going to require us to probably do some things that we might not normally think about or want to do. I think that oftentimes when we think about the families that we serve, not only are they marginalized, largely African American, blah, 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 all those things, but there's this attitude that they somehow have done something and they don't quite deserve all of the resources that we can give them. And I think that, again, my well-being is tied to the families that we serve, not just because they look like me and they often live in the neighborhood, but because they're going to take care of me when I get older. They're checking out my groceries. We have this connection, even though my day-to-day experience doesn't mirror theirs. And so we're connected, even though we don't necessarily see it and know it.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for what you're saying. I have a question about the foster care system. My wife's a social worker, so I have a slight understanding of it. Do you believe two things? One, if St. Louis County does a better job at creating language services, would that help people in foster care also, or help communicate with families? That's the first part. The second part is there a stigma in education against foster kids? And does that hinder foster kids from matriculating to college and things like that? And can we work on that kind of stigma in the area as a way to help foster kids not only be seen fully for themselves, but also give them a chance to really matriculate to higher education and things like that?
So I'm going to answer the first question, Mr. Murdoch, the talking about language. You said language services, right? Language.
Yes, language services. Yeah. Do you have a
So
need for augmented language services?
it's very rare that we get a non-English speaking family. And if you look at the data, you see that it's mostly Black folks and a little bit of white folks, right? And it doesn't mean that they don't, but that's not really, it is very unusual.
Okay.
Sometimes we have a Hispanic family or an Asian family that may not be English may not be their first language, but you can see the scrambling trying to make sure that we have an interpreter. This is just not
Okay.
something that we see. It's very predictable who's in foster care. In terms of the foster kids ain't nobody kids, right? Your parents can't take care of you, right? Because there have been circumstances that in your home of origin that created safety concerns, right? So they're not able to care for you right now. If you're fortunate enough to be placed with a relative, that may be better, right? It allows you to stay connected to your culture and community. But what we see is that almost an equal number of children are placed in non-relative foster homes. So those are professional parents who are standing again in that parenting role. But they may not necessarily attend to that foster child's academic progression and matriculation the same way they might their own children. And the reality is that many of the kids that come into care also, which is why the services that CSF funds and more resources around mental health and even tutoring and academic support are so important, because most of our kids are behind. They may not have been going to school regularly. They may not have made good academic progress, so they can't perform at grade level. I believe in the power of people. I want to be very clear in saying that. But when kids from foster care graduate, the team usually from high school, the team usually really celebrates, because it's not a given, right? If you're an older youth in foster care, you're more likely to age out not having earned your high school diploma. You're more likely to be homeless at some point. You're more likely to come into contact with the public assistance system, criminal justice system. In some ways, we just move them from one system to the next. And so making sure that we have some of those same supports and resources that we fight for and provide for our own kids, I think that they should be available to kids in care. And so challenging school systems to make sure that they do the best for those children, even though they may not be residents of that district, right? They may be placed in a foster home, but their home of record is in the neighboring district. And then also, most districts in North County, I know for sure, have established like a foster care transition, someone who's focused on that. But again, being able to marry the need with resources that school districts just don't have in place. So it's that systemic stuff that I think would make the difference. But it's going to cost a little bit of money. And our families don't, we're not really voters, right? So
That's another issue. Yes. Thank you. Councilwoman Fine, did you have a question or anything?
Not councilwoman, commissioner. You've given me
Commissioner.
a
I said,
completely
God, I'm giving you an
unearned
upgrade.
and
Commissioner. Yes.
dare I say unwanted upgrade. Um, so two questions. The first is there anything like an IEP required for children in foster care? Okay, so there's no like federal or okay. And then I hear you talking about mental health today. I basically had to turn to Twitter to crowdsource some recommendations of a therapist for a friend who has insurance, decent insurance, but none of the therapists that I know are taking new patients, frankly, right? And I don't know how many folks St. Louis County employs, right? But I I think that there's a very unspoken but parallel epidemic around mental health that we are facing currently. Um, and I think that the ARPA funds are great, and I know that our president has talked about his priority and mental health as one of them. I personally, as both a county taxpayer and a commissioner, don't really want to see all this money put into, like, if we're going to prioritize, yes, I think we should do something about all the potholes. But I don't really want to see this money put into like tearing down or building up developments when a lot of folks cannot, even with insurance, right? And that's separate from folks who don't have insurance, don't have access to the internet, um, are not doing well, right? Because that is something, and to your point, right? Developers have high paid lobbyists, children with needs, children who are facing struggles at home, children who are being abused. And one thing I will say on the language access point is I don't want to generalize, but within some of our communities, that stuff will never make it. That stuff will never be reported. It will always be kept within the family. And regardless of how much abuse or trauma occurs within the home, it will just never, ever be reported. It will never make any system, unfortunately. So, in terms of mental health, what would you like to see for the communities that you serve?
Thank you so much for the question, Commissioner. I mean, I really do think it is about quality, accessible, affordable mental health, right? Making sure that the resources are in the communities where they have the greatest need. Most kids and all kids in foster care actually um, uh, are on Medicaid. Not the same Medicaid pot as income dependent if they were with their families, but because they're in care, and the reimbursement rate is very low. So those quality providers don't typically create space in their practice for Medicaid clients, because even those with good insurance, right, have a hard time getting in. I think making sure that our kids and families have access to clinicians who have some prior experience working with those communities or our community. I'm putting myself in the middle of it, right? Because it is different. I think that there are so many things that our families in foster care, and we believe in reunification. Reunification is the primary goal, both because we know our kids do better when they go home and when they stay with their families, and when that's the law. But there are so many things that our families have to navigate that just aren't part of my day to day. And I think having someone who at least creates a safe space for them to navigate those and problem solve on how they can get those things addressed without creating safety risk for the kids is important as well. So mental health, mental health, mental health. Our families our children are really struggling. A pandemic, abuse and neglect, a history of trauma, the unsettled nature of foster care. And then the parents, have their own set of concerns that they're navigating. This is actually, we are starting to see the impact of COVID on families' safety, children's safety. We're seeing kids with more serious abuse. We're seeing kids with more serious mental health issues that are going to be a barrier to reunification. We're seeing parents who are having more mental health issues, who are relapsing after having been sober for quite some time. Mental health treatment, mental health treatment. That's all I can say.
Thank you
Um,
for that. I think I think we're gonna have to continue this part of the conversation. We have an 8 o'clock kind of cutoff, but we're gonna go over 8 o'clock a little bit. So we're gonna extend the time here because it's been a good conversation. But I want to thank you and the CASA of St. Louis for that talk. It was very informative, and we will be following up with you to have more conversations because we're just touching the beginning of some things here. We're gonna build some community relationships with this. And the next speaker is from the St. Louis County Youth Advisory Board, Farian Khan. Are you there, Ms. Khan? Yeah, you there, Ms. Khan?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Can you be a
I can
little
hear you.
louder? Can you turn up your
Maybe a little
volume?
louder, but yeah. Yeah.
Are we okay now? Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Hello. I'm the chair of the St. Louis Youth Advisory Council. I am also, I'm just throwing this out there so you have a little bit of background because I'm going to continue that conversation on mental health a little bit. I'm also a freshman at Mizzou studying political science, and I am the RAPLA for our TRIO program here on campus. So if you don't know what TRIO is, the federal program, outreach and student services program. And essentially it's designed to put individuals in touch with services from disadvantaged backgrounds. We serve a lot of different kinds of kids. I'm a really proud member of TRIO. They take care of me here. And I'm really happy to be able to give that back to new and incoming students. So I just kind of want to throw that out there because I'm going to be talking a lot about youth mental health in St. Louis. I'm also a graduate during COVID. So that wasn't the most fun, and that definitely took a toll, I know, on my mental health and my peers' mental health. So I just want to preface with, I get it, guys. Mental health and COVID was not an easy battle. So a couple of things that the Youth Advisory Council we're actually taking on is taking the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory into account when we're talking about youth mental health. So a couple of just things that the Youth Advisory Council is looking to do is to talk to kids, do some outreach, do some surveys to see where is everybody at. I know that I've been out of high school for a second now, so I'm trying to see where kids are right now. So some of those things that we're doing are the surveys and outreach, panels, and talking about resources in schools. One of which is Youth in Need, if anybody's familiar with that, but they are fantastic. But yeah, so a couple of things that some of these are coming from me, some of these are coming from the Surgeon General's report, some of these are coming from our advisory council, is what local governments can do. And the first one that I think is almost one of the most important one is addressing economic and social barriers. So we're talking about reducing child poverty, quality childcare, early childhood services, things like that. And I know I'm going to run through these kind of quickly. Please ask questions if you need answers because I know we're short on time. But the second one is mental health care. Okay. The second one is mental health care, specifically mental health care for youth in schools. So programs like Youth in Need, and then another, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Another just point to make is supporting mental health providers. Youth in Need is an amazing program, an amazing service. They are stretched super, super thin. I've been lucky to work with therapists within Youth in Need. They have a really high turnover rate. They really struggle to keep Youth in Need providers in schools, consistent Youth in Need providers in schools. And being a mental health provider in COVID now is just incredibly difficult. So props to those who do it. So funding for mental health providers, funding those programs is really important to youth mental health. Yeah, and let me see what else I have. Strengthening school-based mental health programs. Like I kind of said, there are some other programs that I've seen, mainly prevention programs, suicide prevention programs. Some programs that my school district did specifically that I helped put together was creating safe spaces for students of color, marginalized groups to meet with counselors and talk group therapy community style. We also did a lot of town halls within schools in an attempt to let kids speak for themselves. I'm a really big advocate for passing the microphone when these issues arise, because I'm a big believer in kids and youth are change makers. Inherently, we see things differently, we experience things differently than other generations. So we should speak for ourselves when the time comes. And then suicide prevention and mental health crisis services. This kind of made, I don't remember who said it, but someone said something about funding social services and helping rebuild those services in order to allow kids to access what they need. That is vaguely all I really had to say. Please ask questions. Please input. I'm happy to take it all. I'm also happy to take a lot, any and all input back to the Youth Advisory Council. Yeah.
Well, two things. One, I would like to meet with the Youth Advisory Council in the near future, just to get to know you and build a relationship. And two, how do you feel the vision for the Youth Advisory Council? And what I mean is, what do y'all want to say to government, kind of, from the youth perspective? A lot of times, I come from a campaign background, so a lot of times when I'm thinking of youth, I'm thinking, hey, let's make sure we get the vote, rock the vote out, type things like that. What's important to the Youth Advisory Committee? Mental health, I'm hearing youth mental health, especially during COVID. What are the kind of things, like two more things that y'all are finding are prioritizing?
So some other topics that we're talking about besides mental health on our council right now in conversation is we're talking about race relations and discrimination in schools, and then we're also talking about climate change and environmental impacts. Sorry, it's like I suddenly started being the chair of the council and forgot everything we do. But sorry guys, long day. I'm approaching finals week. But anyways, yeah, so those are just two topics we're talking about. Mind you that the Youth Advisory Council, we're kind of in a rebuild process, and we're trying to get our feet wet and hanging on to these topics. The Children's Service Fund has been amazing, and they've been helping us a lot, geared towards what we want to do and how we want to do it. But yeah, so environmental impact and mental health and critical race theory, racial discrimination in schools, and it's liking are kind of what we're talking about a lot on the table right now.
All right.
I think it would be good for us to also, on the Human Relations Commission, to hear from y'all. Certainly give you some space after finals and after some vacation time that you can and should have. But then to come back and kind of, because I think we're out of touch with the youth space. I mean, we're certainly missing some members, and there has been an intent very specifically to try and get nominated and confirmed some new members who represent a whole variety of different lenses, but uniquely come from a youth space. So it would be consider this a formal invite for whenever you feel you can breathe again. We meet the second Friday of the month, and you can find either myself, Ms. Fan, or Mr. Murdoch, and we'll keep the conversation going. I appreciate you being here, and good luck on all your work.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I was actually going to suggest that we meet with the whole youth council as the HRC if that's not too difficult to schedule, or at least more members. I also want to thank you for being here. It's nice to no longer be the youngest person in the room. And I think, I'm working on building the first NHPI mental health fund in the state. I received a small grant to do that. So let's connect offline. And I'm just, HRC, our commission is also in the process of rebuilding after, yeah. So, yeah, I was told that you guys had your report out before us, so kudos on that. Not to be competitive at all, but good luck on your finals, and thank you.
Thank you. For whatever it's worth, our report was initially very vague. So yours was probably more detailed than ours was, but yeah, absolutely. I would love to connect. I know I'll just throwing this out there. I'm in Columbia right now, but I will be back in St. Louis really soon. As soon as school's over, but I would love to connect with you all in person.
Definitely, and good luck on finals. I hope that goes well. All right, thank you, Ms. Khan. And our next speaker is from Diversity Job Source, Ms. Lynn Anderson. Lynn, are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Hi, Lynn, you have the floor. The floor is yours.
This has been very informative, and I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be along this panel to listen to these discussions. I've been a native of St. Louis County for well over 35 years, and so it's very personable for me. So my discussion might be way away from some of the things that you discussed, but then again, some of the things that they were talking about is actually in my notes. So that's what I'm really excited about, is that some of the other panelists have the same concerns that I have. Again, I'm the Diversity Operations Manager for Diversity Job Source. Diversity Job Source is a company that assists employers with finding diverse candidates. I've been in business since 2006, but we have been Diversity Job Source since 2017. So 375 companies employ us to find people. So that's what we do. We also provide career services and job readiness workshops, resume writing workshops, and we simply give the employers access to candidates. But the main reason that the main topics I would like to talk about is not my company. It's things that I feel that would benefit St. Louis County, and as far as changes and positive changes that would be beneficial for everyone. So I'm just going to go down the list, and I don't think that I'm going to get a chance to really, hone in on each one of them, but I'll go through the list. I've numbered it. The first thing that I have here is increasing St. Louis County's population with a more diverse demographic and multicultural communities. So with that being said, what I would love to see is that we no longer segregate the area, because the segregation is not going to benefit us. We need to blend everyone. We need to target other multicultural people to live in areas that they normally wouldn't live in. I think the diversity would be beneficial for everyone, simply because some of these people just need to see something else. And if they see something else, then that's where the change comes in. So I was looking at like the parks, the skating rinks, the pools, the recreational centers. St. Louis County has done a wonderful job in keeping up our parks and our recreational centers. If we focus on making them more multicultural, and they were talking about the speech, the language and educational programs to definitely include the other languages, we need that more than anything. So I'm definitely, that's just one of the pieces in my notes as well. The second thing here is that I have exceed the national growth rate in jobs and payrolls, and exceeding the national growth rate or the local growth rate. How we can do that and target that goal is job training and creation programs. Now, I know workforce and development has already had some of these things in place. A lot of people don't know that they have these things in place. We need to make the public more aware of what workforce and development and the Work Investment Act consists of and how big it is, because these job training and creation programs, the collaboration between the educators and the employers can help narrow the employment skills gap and increase the relevancy in education. I think that if we look at more internships and apprenticeship programs, we definitely can make our society here evolve. And that's what we need. We need evolution. We need to grow. We need to expand. We need to start from where we are and move forward. We can't keep standing still. So with the internships and apprenticeship programs and the job training and creation programs like the Met Center over in Wellston, I think that we definitely need more of those buildings. Okay, so that was the second thing. And so the third thing that I have here is raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. So $15 an hour, and why I was looking at that number. I did some research, and pretty much across the board, most of the states are saying the same thing, that if we bump it up to $15 an hour, it invites the union and also invite the union to welcome these changes. Then we can make it to where people can afford to live. Right now, the idea of being able to afford to live in St. Louis County is not a feasible target or goal for some people, because the pay is just simply not there. And it's been studies that has indicated that we need to get to that number, and we can't stay at the number that we're at nationwide. And they show you what the housing cost is right now, the food cost. We all know that we're in an inflation stage, so it's very pertinent that we get this matter out in the public. It was there a couple of years ago, but I think I'm not sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, that St. Louis City and St. Louis County was actually had like $11 or something like that. And you all correct me. I can't remember what.
All I can tell you very specifically is that St. Louis County government has a $15 minimum wage requirement that started 2 years ago, I think.
Okay.
And tomorrow a compensation study is going to hit the street. A request for proposal is out for a compensation study because, and this is internal, I admit, not external. County employees have not had a significant study review. I think it's been 20 years, and there's been no merit increase for St. Louis County employees, I think, since it's like ridiculous, like 15 years ago. And so part of our challenge is we want the best and the brightest to come in to serve. And yes, there are certain things we can offer people who are committed to public service and the unique aspect of being a government public sector employee, but we've got to be able to give them living wages and whatever additional benefits we can to make that work. I'm hoping the compensation study is done by the end of the year, and that we can actually go to the council with a meaningful request for whatever it's going to cost. Me and my crystal ball, you can start laughing right now, but I'm going to, we're going to give it a try. But I think that's something that at least the minimum wage, the $15 floor is in there. But boy, do we have a lot of openings. Wow, do we have a lot of openings. So that's something we've got to be, and by the way, intentional relative to what Colleen was talking about relative to disability, folks who represent the span of language access, the span of ethnic and religious background. Do I think it's there the way I'd like to see it? That's just a personal opinion, but I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's wonderful. So yeah, well, definitely, I'm all for it as a St. Louis County resident and a business owner. I would love to see across the board $15 an hour being minimum wage. And I guess some ways to do that is to look at some of the big box companies that are here and look at their profit margins, what they've done in the last 3 years, and see if it's feasible. And I'm sure it is. And that's why Walmart and Target is now starting at $15 an hour. So I provide the information to my job seekers. So I deal with over 1,000 job seekers, and I deal with these companies, and I'm just looking at, is there balance? And there's not. It's not balanced here in St. Louis. So we have to fix that. And if we create a plan or a strategy, I think that if everyone gets together and creates a plan or a strategy, it can work. So it's not like something we can just write up overnight, because it's a bigger issue than what we know. But we know that people are losing their homes, and people are losing. They're not eating because they don't have food stamps, and they have to pay cash for food, and food is just too expensive. So that means the pay has to go up. So the fourth issue I have on here is close the existing opportunity, employment, wage, entrepreneurship, and wealth gaps. So if we close the entrepreneurship and wage gaps, some ways that we can target that is by promoting job readiness and career readiness programs. Now, we have these in place, of course, at St. Louis Community College and MERS Goodwill and some of these places that's been around for a very long time, but we need more. So at the St. Louis City Libraries, the St. Louis County Libraries, we need to have these ongoing on a weekly basis like they were before. And if they are at all the libraries, then the people that come in for job readiness and career readiness programs will be job ready, because a lot of these kids are not job ready. So that's why when they get a job, they just quit because they're not ready. And so these programs are effective. They've worked in the past. And some of the people may not be able to get there, so we go back to the idea about the bus passes. It's not called the worker office, so I don't want to call that, but the FSD used to give out the bus passes. So I don't know if that's still an option, but that would be great. Okay. And then the other thing I have here, it says make this information readily available at the libraries, but as well as the recreational centers. So a lot of the youth, they're going to the recreational centers, and they're there on a daily basis. I see it because I'm on the pavement. So I don't just, even though I do some work from home, I'm actually in the field dealing with these people directly on a one-on-one basis. So I'm dealing with workforce development. I'm dealing with the recreational centers. I deal with the St. Louis County Libraries, and I deal with the youth directly. So some of the youth, I just get them from the street, and I actually, see what their goals are, how I can help to meet their goals, give them the resources that they need, and point them in the right direction. The other thing I have here is equal opportunities for St. Louis County residents and future residents that focus on thriving and enhancing their situation. So one of the other panelists talked about equal opportunities and the discrimination against people with disabilities. This is huge in St. Louis. This is huge. And unfortunately, we don't know about all of the stories, but each one of us on the panel may know individually about some personable story.
Yeah.
And definitely one of those people. So the discrimination against people with disabilities needs to be talked about in along with you all, and how you all can address that and stop that from happening with these companies that are here. And that's just one of my ideas. I don't know how you can attack that, but I think that needs to be a separate discussion because it's real, and people are being discriminated against that have disabilities. I know about the programs that help these people, like People for Places, and I know about the shelter workshops. They don't talk a lot about the shelter workshops like they used to. If they put the information in the community, then people would know about these things, because some of these people are just lost. They don't know what to do. If they don't have someone overseeing them, caring for them, they don't know where to start. They just know that they're disabled, and that's it. So I'm just going to try to run down my list. I'm sorry. Financial empowerment, employment, housing, and entrepreneur information. So financial empowerment. I saw that there are some series going on with some workshops to let the people in the county know about financial empowerment is very, very important, because a lot of people don't have good credit in St. Louis County. So if they are familiar with the financial empowerment workshops, then they can become more savvy on how to build their credit, how to start fresh, whether or not they're a good candidate for bankruptcy, whatever it takes to get them back on track with their candidate. I actually do credit repair as well, but I don't advertise it. I just do it. People point to me and I say, okay, I'll help you. because I'm very good and versed at it. But it's very important that people have good credit, because you can't attain the things that are your goal if you don't have the credit. And so the housing in St. Louis, we know that we have a homeless problem here. We have a homeless problem here. We have a drug problem here. We have a mental health problem here in St. Louis County. So these are big issues that are on the table. The homeless prevention, definitely for me, is very important. And I know that we can't literally go out and buy a home for each homeless person, but we need to make sure that they're not on the street. We need to make sure that that the programs that are out there, like Catholic Charities and St. Vincent de Paul and St. Patrick's Center, and these places are not being overwhelmed, and we can provide some of this money to build other places so that we can get these people inside and they can get in touch with these programs for mental health awareness and drug prevention. We have a heroin problem in St. Louis, a major heroin problem. And so attacking these things is going to be very, very critical in order for us to rebuild, because we need to rebuild. So rebuilding needs to look real. And even though we know that it's a long laundry list of things to do, some of these other things are definitely need to be a priority. The down payment assistance programs from Beyond Housing and Better Family Life, these are excellent programs. Not everyone knows about these programs. So again, making the information readily available in the local libraries, in the schools, in the recreational centers, and then having someone actually go out on foot to see if it's there. Because a lot of times, even though we'll think that the information is there because someone is assigned to put it there, it may not be there. So we actually need someone that's going to follow up to see if the information regarding the down payment assistance programs and shelters, if the information is being readily available to the public. Reform the taxation for St. Louis County residents, reducing taxes for certain income levels and providing breaks for gas, utilities, and rent, especially since the rent has gone up. So the rent has gone up across the board. So therefore, if the rent has gone up and these people they don't have any leeway, reducing or reforming the taxation for the low-income people, I think will be beneficial. Did anyone have anything that they wanted to say? I got a few more items, but I don't just want to talk you to death.
Actually, can you email me the whole list?
Yes, I sure can.
I will make sure you.
I just want to thank you for bringing up our parks. I think that our parks are really, truly a gem of the county. And when I asked the question about where we are, I don't know what we'd call it, a thought leader, but I will say that during COVID, the parks have been a great place for me to recuperate and great for my mental health. So you brought up the libraries and the rec centers. The HRC, we had discussed maybe going out and having these meetings in, person in a library. What are a few of the libraries and rec centers that you think we should go to?
The gyms. Okay, so I'm going to call them the gyms, GEMS. Okay, so definitely Lewis and Clark Library on Lewis and Clark, 9909 Lewis and Clark Boulevard. That branch has been consistent. That branch is very well kept. It has all the attributes that I feel that a library should consist of in St. Louis County. So I would definitely say that will be a great place to start. The other library will be Prairie Commons up in Hazelwood. It's excellent. Prairie Commons is they're very hospitable. They have a garden. They have a play area out back. I mean, it's excellent. So that's another one. And then the meeting rooms, of course. I think the meeting rooms were added to all of the St. Louis County libraries, I would say roughly around 2 to 3 years ago, as far as the new look and feel of the meeting rooms. Another thing that I had in mind that I never did even put out there to anyone was the prison visitation thing, where in St. Louis we have vans that will take people to visit people in prison. Well, St. Louis County Library actually has the space now that they've created where they could have like the phones there, because most of the prisons now have virtual visits. And so I was thinking maybe that's something they could introduce later on down the road for families to actually use the virtual visit on a phone in a library. It's just a thought.
Yeah, the Justice Center has made available to all of its residents tablets.
Oh,
And-
wow.
And they're
Hmm.
they can get entertainment. I mean, they watch movies, but they can also do educational programs. I can't remember. It's not it might be it might be Forest Park. I'm not sure. But yeah, I think they're doing some really interesting work in the tablets. The technology has made a huge, I mean, obviously during COVID, but
I mean, huge.
can continue to be a huge impact, no question.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I think I only got one more item here, and that was implementing more music and art programs.
Oh, love that idea.
Yeah,
Huge.
boost the momentum, because
Enormous.
that's what we need. We need to boost the momentum. We need to get excited. We need to be happy. We got to have more events that are wrapped around music and art. And I think that would definitely be beneficial
no
to
question.
everyone. Mhm.
No question.
Well, thank you very much for that input, Ms. Anderson. That really gave us a new focus, and I really like some of your especially that virtual visit at the library. That could be something we could really look into. I like that a lot. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, and our final speaker for tonight, thank you for your patience. Amy, I'm gonna let you pronounce your last name.
Wilmeyer
From Paraquad. Thank you, Amy. The floor is yours.
All right, just to keep me moving quickly, can I share a PowerPoint?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Do I have access to do that?
Do you see your share button light up? Does it allow you?
Rob, could you please give her privileges?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, Rob, can you give her shares? Is Rob there?
Did you see a box come up on your
Does the
side?
share light up so you can
No, it's not.
through?
It's dull.
Okay.
That's okay. I can improvise.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
But please email me the copy of the PowerPoint.
Yeah,
so
we
I put
want it in the
on
record. Yeah.
Okay, well, I will start by just sharing. So my name is Amy. I'm with Paraquad, president of Paraquad, and we changed our tagline this year. And our tagline is making independence accessible. And that's really what the theme of what I will talk about for the next few minutes. Our mission is to champion equity and independence for people with disabilities through services, partnerships, education, advocacy. So our vision is a big one. We envision an integrated society free of barriers and discrimination, where disability is viewed as a natural part of human diversity. I like to say it just is. And so what I did in preparation is I talked to about, oh gosh, probably close to 10 different organizations that serve various individuals with disabilities, and just wanted to see what they thought were the greatest needs for people with disabilities in our community. So what I have is the top needs for people, and this was across the board. Number one was reliable, affordable, and accessible transportation. That is a huge barrier, very complicated after COVID. You know, paratransit is struggling with drivers, and there is just not a system available right now for people with disabilities that is reliable and that's affordable and that's even available. And so that impacts everything from employment to just living, accessing healthcare, all of those things. Number two, everyone talked about safe, affordable, and accessible housing. We get over close to 5,000 calls a year, and the number one thing that people ask about is affordable and accessible housing. Related to that is home modifications and home repairs. So it's a very messy system, particularly when you have a new disability and trying to, I know when I moved to St. Louis, just trying to find any kind of accessible home was nearly impossible. Next on my list is basic needs. So just things like food, rent, utilities, assistance, all those things. And then I think Colleen and multiple people talked about employment opportunities. We talk about, how, so many things. You can certainly look around and see changes to the community in terms of access and opportunity. But the one thing that is staying consistent is the low unemployment rate for people with disabilities. And then another thing is just community access. I know when I moved to St. Louis, the most challenging thing for me was the just recognition that there were so many things that continue to be inaccessible for me and for other people. Next, I'm going to focus. So that was just a general list that was pretty much across the board. Some other areas for individuals with developmental disabilities and also people with physical disabilities and older adults is that there is such a shortage of caregivers and direct support professionals. It is nearly impossible to find adequate care if you have a disability. This was brought up over and over again. The lack of mental health services for people who've been isolated, particularly with disabilities who are at higher risk and couldn't get out. That has certainly taken a toll on mental health. Again, so many people shifted to technology during the pandemic. And so that has been a struggle for someone in terms of assistive technology or folks with intellectual disabilities, and just having the education and training around how to use technology has created a major barrier. And then as people are aging with developmental disabilities, having the types of supports that they need when family members are gone, and making sure that people are, safe and living, as they want to live in the community.
Excuse me, Amy.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Can you see if you have the sharing privilege now? In case you want to use it. Okay. Thank you.
There we go. So for individuals, let me put this in. So for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing, what I heard consistently was open access to communication. So that could be interpreters, that could be captions on TV, that could be open captions at movie theaters, or just learning enough American Sign Language just to be helpful. And then the primary thing I heard too is providing that access up front in the planning process and not as an afterthought. So again, sort of created the same barriers for people who speak different languages, just making sure that folks have access to communication. For individuals who are blind and low vision, I brought up transportation again, even though that affects everyone, but that was by and far the biggest barrier for people who are blind or low vision is just an inability to get around. Audible crosswalks. One thing I learned about is that there are lots of resources for glasses for people who are legally blind, but if you have very low vision, glasses are very expensive and there's not good services. And so that is something several organizations talked about. And then also several folks had talked about a lot of discrimination. And so legal assistance is also an area that is top of mind for many folks. So some of the barriers in these Colleen talked a lot about this at the beginning, but people with disabilities are just often not included in conversations or the strategies related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is such a big opportunity. And for the first time, people are talking about it, and people with disabilities just want to be included. I know for Paraquad, the majority of people that we serve are people of color. And so then you have the disability compounded with racial discrimination and all the things that are affecting one another. And so want to be a part of that. Oftentimes decisions are made for rather than with people with disabilities. So appreciate the opportunity tonight to think about how folks with disabilities can be included as you are working toward becoming a change maker, including their voices in that concept. And then I think this got brought up as well, that a lot of things that happened at the federal level and historically often began with somebody who had a personal experience of someone with a disability, a loved one. But there just seems to be a general lack of interest, energy, and passion if they don't have that personal experience of knowing someone with a disability. And then finally, just the low expectations and misconceptions of people with disabilities. I think the one thing that I would say when we talk about making independence accessible, my dream has been and will always be to have a typical life. Nothing fancy, nothing extraordinary, but just the opportunity to live the life that other people get to live.
Thank you very much for what you say. I have a question for you. Do you know if all the polling places in St. Louis County, I know we do have curbside voting in Missouri, but still, are all the polling places accessible to your knowledge?
So we work all the time with polling places. There are certainly polling places that are better than others. And we work to help provide access and also, particularly through COVID and trying other things. But our public policy department would certainly know that because they do tons of work on get out the vote and trying to get folks with disabilities to the polling places.
Well, I'd love you to put me in touch with them. I'd like to
You
get
got
that
it.
and make sure that we are up to stuff on that. Any other questions? Please.
Amy, so I've had some conversations with Melissa Brickey about the disconnect between sort of traditionally considered DEI services and work and the disabilities community. And I just figured that since this is being recorded, I can be held accountable to. I think it would be great for us to maybe bring some of the disability service agencies and some of the other DEI agencies together to have a summit to just start talking about the fact that we are not on the same, that we're not talking in the same circles and we're not working together.
Can I just ask a follow-up? Well, can you give a little background for us? What do you mean specifically when you talk about a disconnect?
Sure. So I'm just following up from what Amy just said in terms of disability is one of the diversity categories.
Absolutely.
And it's very often not a part of the DEI conversation. And so, for instance, at my agency, we certainly have folks with disabilities, but we don't have folks that are there representing their disability. And we don't have folks with visible disabilities, but we talk about it. And like, there's something wrong with that. We don't have that there. And so I think it would be great for us to start working on that.
I love that idea.
I'm sure you know this, but we got to snag Melissa Brickey at Paraquad, and we could not.
I know.
We're planning to rule the world. It'll take a little bit, but we're going to get there. But no, I appreciate that, and that is so true. It's so frustrating because I think that we would be so much stronger if we were working on the same topics together, because it's the same things. It's employment, it's access to housing, it's access to opportunity. It's, all of those, those barriers, what am I trying to say? Those biases. The reality is it is not the same world when you have brown skin, or if you sit in a wheelchair or have other types of disabilities. And so that experience is really, really different. And I think we could do great things together.
Great. And I didn't mean to leave Colleen out. I didn't see your picture up there, so I thought you were gone, but I don't want to be exclusive of any of the organizations that are working on these issues.
Commissioner Aresti, can we also schedule the Disability Commission to come and, the same way that we're going to have a cross conversation with the youth, have a conversation with the Disability Commission?
Sure. I haven't heard from Luke in a while. Luke Barber, who'd been,
I talked to him fairly recently.
okay, cool.
So.
But yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. Absolutely. No question.
And then a question for on transportation. This is mostly because I just don't know how urban planning works or anything, but are there folks within county government, when they're planning out developments or streets or whatever, that are specifically like ADA trained, and who think about that both for, because when you said planning, right? I mean,
Right.
I'm taking it very literally to mean like actual planning, but I also am sure you mean like to bring folks in at the beginning stages of anything.
I know members of our planning department have been trained in planning with an eye towards disabilities. I don't know if there's a certification level or something like that, but I know they have had some training in their planning, getting their master's in planning on that. But that could be a place to augment training too, and to do some more development. So yeah.
But
Hey,
I also,
Colleen had her hand up, I think. It's hard to tell.
I also think we could get folks onto commissions who come from the community, right? To, like the codes, the building commissions. Yeah, I'm just thinking about, I was at a conference once where I was listening to these architects who build a lot of sports stadiums, and I was like, well, you're going to have like rumbling seats and other things. And then I was like, doesn't sound super like great for folks with disabilities or folks with vertigo, etc. And they basically admitted that they don't consider ADA requirements until pretty much the whole plan is put together, and then they kind of like erase some things and then draw some things into the CAD. And I was like, well, okay, that sucks.
Well, and I just want to underscore the barriers that people are feeling right now related to transportation, and it impacts everything. I mean, just imagine if it's not even like you can call a friend. You can't do anything if you don't have the ability to get into a vehicle and get somewhere. Right now, the system is not working. So I think if there are some ways to, use technology and to use, have some requirements like other cities do with Uber and Lyft, and having some accessibility. So anyway, those are just something I wanted to say, that every single organization said that is a major, major barrier.
Can I
This
ask
is
Amy a
Colleen.
question?
Oh, I'm sorry, Colleen and then Lynn.
Okay.
When Max and I started Paraquat as an independent living center, people said, well, what's the one most important issue that you should work on relative to people with disabilities living independently? We said, there isn't, if we could only pick one, it's attitudes, because attitude drives everything. It drives how you build housing and whether or not you think about disabled people, how your transportation system looks, all those things is driven by attitude. But in reality, you cannot work on just transportation to meet the needs of people with disabilities, because then your public rights of way, if they're not accessible, and you get off a bus or the car ride or whatever it is. So we always had worked on issues like that concomitantly, as well as housing. We don't have enough housing in the city or the county that is accessible. And actually, I'm going on to promoting universal design because there are people who aren't disabled yet who will become disabled if they live long enough and can't afford to just buy another house. But to answer the question that was asked earlier about the advisory groups, there are planners in city and county government, but you really do need some people to sit on these advisory councils and talk through issues related to how the lived experience of disability. And they don't have to be code officials, and most of them are not. You can't really go to the disability community and get a code official on all your councils. But when you get down into the weeds and you talk about, well, we're going to, you know, do this neighborhood, and what should we do? Well, you need housing that works for everybody in the neighborhood. You need it close to transportation. You need, you start, disabled people start layering on their issues there. I'll give you a concrete example. When the Gateway Arch Foundation decided to redo the arch, a group of us got together and we created the Universal Design Group under the leadership of David Newberger, the commissioner for the city of St. Louis on disability. And we worked for probably 6 years. And the design teams who came in and showed us their designs, after a couple of times of doing that, came in very carefully because most of their designs would not meet the needs of our community. And most of us aren't code officials. A few of us know what the codes are, but most of us don't. And so having citizen input to help guide the plans that you make is very important. I wouldn't leave it all to the planners or even the architects. What the architects do is they design buildings and then they go look on the page for accessible bathrooms and drop them in from the code book, and they may or may not really realistically meet the needs. We are now working on the Brickway Green, I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, we're working on that, and it's dramatically changing how that whole Brickway walkway, rideway is going to look, because people with disabilities are right on it and working in partnership.
Nice.
All right, Ms.
Lynn,
Anderson.
let me ask Lynn to make the last comment, and then we all gotta
Yeah.
put this one down.
I just had a question in reference, because I didn't know that there was a problem with transportation for the disabled until now. I know that Paraquat attends our event, and here's the question I have. Okay, so like Oats Transportation has been a supplier for the disabled, and my question is, does St. Louis County and the state of Missouri, do they offer the bid opportunities for these companies to secure the contract or the partnership with these agencies so that they can close this gap of not having the enough transportation? So like MT Transportation, O's Transportation, and I guess these ladies will be able to answer that. How do they actually build a relationship? Is it a bid opportunity? Do we need more bid opportunities?
I gotta go, so can I just weigh in real fast on that? If they won't help individuals get from their house to the vehicle, they need to not bid, because there are many people who need that assistance and they don't provide it. I don't know, Amy, if you're still running vans for Paraquat, but Paraquat drivers will do that. But a lot of these others won't take the liability for it. And why call a ride if you can't get out and get on it?
Yeah, that's what my.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
Thanks for everything tonight.
Yeah. Thank you.
Lynn, I can't completely answer your question. I could just say that I know that that folks like Oates, there have been groups who have traditionally, I know like DMH has had difficulty getting drivers. Everybody is scrambling for drivers, and so the problem is that there's not enough money to make it worth it to provide the transportation, and so I think that's the barrier that I am aware of.
Yeah, I've been told that call a ride drivers are not getting out of the van to get the elderly to the van. So you're right. This is this is a problem. This is a problem. Yes.
All right, folks. Well, we're a little over time, so we're going to.
Can I just make one statement since we are talking about St. Louis County as a change agent? I would like to thank and memorialize Cora Faith Walker, who I definitely think of as a change agent. So
Yeah.
that's all.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much for that. She was a valued employee and friend. All right. Well, everybody, Karen, do you have any last words?
No, I just want to thank everybody. Really appreciate the substance and the passion of this conversation. And I think I got some very specific things I need to follow up on tomorrow that are more advocacy than they are systemic, but at least the advocacy piece in the short term can inform some of the folks, and then maybe we can go to the more systemic bits from there.
I
But
would just like to say, sorry.
no, go
Just
ahead.
say in closing tonight, when we first started this idea of St. Louis County as a change agent, it seemed kind of weird to try and paradigm a whole county into that way of thinking. But now that we've started that role, I think the best thing we could do is take now tonight an oath of tenacity that we will keep trying until we get St. Louis to be the change agent we want it to be. And this is the first of many conversations that we will keep pushing until we get everybody real equity in this county. With that said, I want to thank you all for participating tonight. I will be reaching out to you from my office through email if you want to send me documents and things like that. But this is the beginning of a very good conversation with St. Louis County. So thank you for helping us build equity tonight, and everybody have a good night tonight.
Thanks, y'all. Be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.